It's 100% honest. That's a mighty important quality, Ralph." Callahan was getting worried. The boss's conversation was just a little too folksy for his liking. "Yes, sir, a mighty fine quality. My father used to say, 'Andrew, an honest man can always look you in the eyes.'" Callahan stared uncomprehendingly. He realized that Moss had stopped talking, so he looked him squarely in the eyes and said, "He must have been a fine man, your father." "He was honest," said Moss. "I'll say that for him. He was as honest as they come. Did you ever hear of DiMaggio?" "It sounds familiar." "It should. DiMaggio was a legendary figure. He took a lantern and went out into the world looking for an honest man. And do you know something? He couldn't find one. You know, Ralph, sometimes I feel like DiMaggio." Callahan gulped. "And do you know why? Because sometimes I see a thing like this." The boss's hand reached into the desk and came out with a thick bundle of pink cards. "And I wonder if there's an honest man left in the world." He put the cards in front of Callahan. "Now, sir," said Moss, "let's talk a little business. These cards are all pink. That means dismissal, right? That's 24 people fired in the last month. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir," said Callahan unhappily. "And how many cards went through the personnel evac this month?" 40. "So that's 24 out of 40. A batting average of—" The boss's brow puckered. "Well, never mind. But that's quite an unusual record, wouldn't you say so?" "Yes, sir, but—" "So unusual that it would call for immediate action, wouldn't it?" The president's face was now stormy. "Yes, sir, but I checked the brain—" "Did you, Ralph?" "Yes, sir, and the maintainovac said it was perfect. There's nothing wrong with it." "Nothing wrong? You call 24 firings out of 40 nothing?" The old man stood up, still holding the core of his apple. "Well, I don't understand it either, Mr. Moss." Callahan felt dew on his forehead. "Nothing seems to satisfy the brain any more. It seems to develop higher and higher standards or something. Why, I'm not sure it wouldn't even fire—" "Who?" said Moss thunderously. "Who wouldn't it even fire?" The thunder hit Callahan squarely. He swallowed hard and then managed to say, "Anybody, sir. Me, for instance." The president's face suddenly relaxed. "I'm no tyrant, my boy. You know that. I'm just doing a job, that's all." "Of course, sir." "Well, all I want you to do is keep your eye on things. It could be a coincidence, of course. That's the logical explanation." He narrowed his eyes. "What do you think, Ralph?" "Me, sir?" said Ralph, wide-eyed. "I don't think, sir. I act, sir." "Good boy!" The boss chuckled and clapped his hand on Callahan's shoulder. Moss was momentarily satisfied. The personnel evac burped. Callahan picked up the card with a groan. It was pink. He walked over to the action chute and dropped it inside. As it fluttered down below, Callahan shook his head sadly. 31, he said. He placed the next personnel record into the information chamber. He flipped a lever, and the personnel evac, now hot with usage, winked, chittered, chortled, and chuckled with amazing speed. The burp was almost joyful as the card popped out. But Callahan's face was far from joyful as he picked it up. Pink. 32, he said. The next card was from Grimswitch's department. It was subject number 52098. The number was familiar. Callahan decided to check the file. "Sam Gilchrist," he said. "Couldn't be anything wrong with Sam. Why, he's a blinking genius." Flip, wink, chitter, chortle, chuckle, burp. Pink. "Poor Sam," said Callahan. He fed the other records through quickly. Pink, pink, pink. At the end of the day, Callahan worked laboriously with a blunt-pointed pencil. It took him 15 minutes for the simple calculation. 67 tests, 23 OK, 44... Callahan put his hands to his head. "What am I going to do?" Grimswitch followed Callahan down the hall as he came out of the boss's office for the third time that week. "Well," he said fatuously, "quite the teacher's pet these days, eh, Callahan?" "Go away, Grimswitch." "On the carpet, eh? Temper a little short? Don't worry." Grimswitch's beefy hand made unpleasant contact with the personnel man's shoulder. "Your old friends won't let you down." "Grimswitch, will you please leave me alone?" Better watch that think machine of yours, Grimswitch chuckled. Might fire you next, old boy. Callahan was glad when Morgan, the production operator, hailed Grimswitch away. But as he entered his own office, Grimswitch's words still troubled him. Grimswitch, he thought, that fat piece of garbage, that big blowhard, that know-it-all. Almost savagely, he picked up the day's personnel cards and flipped through them carelessly. Grimswitch, that louse, he thought. Then he had the idea. If Grimswitch was still chewing the fat with Morgan, then his secretary would be alone. If he called her and asked for Grimswitch's record, no, better yet, got Miss Blanche to call. Why not? He thought. After all, I am the personnel manager. Sure, it's a little irregular. He is a department head, but it's my job, isn't it? Callahan flipped the intercom and proceeded to call Miss Blanche. His hand shook as he placed Grimswitch's card into the personnel-evac. The machine, though still heated by the day's activity, seemed to take longer than usual for its chittering, chuckling examination of the pinholed facts on the record. Finally, it gave a satisfied burp and proffered the result to Colin's eager hand. "Aha!" cried the personnel man gleefully. He walked over to his desk, wrote a quick note on his memo pad, and placed both the note and card into an envelope. He addressed it to Office of the President. Then he dropped it into the action chute. When it was out of sight, he rubbed his hands together in happy anticipation. When Miss Blanche announced that President Moss himself was in Callahan's outer lobby, the personnel manager spent a hasty minute in straightening up the paper debris on his desk. The old man came striding into the room, exhibiting plenty of PEP, and he seated himself briskly on Callahan's sofa. "Sharp eyes, Ralph," he said. "Sharp eyes and a quick wit. This business demands it. That was a sharp notion you had, doing a run-through on Grimswitch. Never trusted that back-slapping fellow." Callahan looked pleased. "Trying to do a job, sir." "Put your finger on it," said Moss. "Hit the nail on the head. It's just like my father said. Trees go dead on the top. Callahan," the boss leaned forward confidentially, "I've got an assignment for you. Big assignment." "Yes, sir," said Callahan eagerly. "If Grimswitch is a sour apple, maybe other department heads are too. And who knows? It knows." Moss pointed a finger at the personnel-evac. "I'm rounding up all the aptitude records of the department heads. They'll be in your hands in the next couple of days. Feed 'em in, root 'em out. Spot the deadwood, Callahan. Act." "Act," echoed Callahan, his face flushed. The old man got up and went over to the brain. "Marvelous machine," he said. "Honest, that's what I like about it." As Moss went out the door, Callahan could have sworn he saw the personnel-evac wink. He walked over to it and fingered the lever. It was turned off, all right. It was an interesting week for Callahan. Morgan, the production man, was fired. Grimswitch came up to see the personnel man and tried to punch him in the nose. Fortunately, he was a little too drunk and the blow went wild. Seagram, the ship-evac operator, was fired. Douglas, the treasurer, was permitted to keep his job, but the personnel-evac issued a dire threat if improvement wasn't rapidly forthcoming. Wilson, the firm's oldest employee, was fired. In fact, 7 out of General Products' 12 department heads were greeted by the ominous pink card. Callahan, no longer plagued by doubt, felt that life was definitely worth living. He smiled all the time. His memos were snappier than ever. His heels clicked merrily down the office hallways. He had PEP. Then, the most obvious thing in the world happened, and Callahan just hadn't foreseen it. His record card came up. "Have you run through the stack yet?" Miss Blanche asked. Just about." Callahan looked at her guiltily. He pushed his glasses back on the bridge of his nose. "Couple more here," he said. "Well, we might as well finish up. Mr. Moss would like to have the schedule completed this afternoon." "It will be. That's all, Miss Blanche." His secretary shrugged and left. Callahan went to the personnel-evac with the record in his hand. The file number was 630. "Don't let me down," he told the brain. He placed the pinholed card into the machine and flipped the lever. It winked, chittered, chortled, and chuckled with almost sinister softness. When the card was burped out at the other end, Callahan took it out with his eyes firmly shut. He walked over to the action chute mechanically. His hand hesitated before he dropped it inside. Then he changed his mind, walked back to the desk, and tore the pink card into the smallest possible shreds. The intercom beeped.